Good to see you again. In this video, I want to talk a bit about the coronavirus, patterns and personality type from an NLP perspective. Now, those of you who are familiar with NLP would know that the NLP communication model is a lot about pattern recognition. So it's how to recognize a pattern and model out the key elements. So we get the NLP Meta Model, Robert Dilts' Sleight of Mouth model, NLP Meta Programs, and so on. And then we use the NLP tools in a conversation with a client to model out the structure and processes the client uses in their mind to create their state or do their behaviour, and help them to make transformational change. So let's take a look at the situation with the coronavirus. Now, I should make it clear that I'm not a doctor, scientist, healthcare professional. I'm just a guy who sees patterns in terms of personality type. I'm an INTJ, which means my dominant cognitive function is introverted intuition, which means I naturally look for the relationship between things and ideas. That is, I get a perspective on how they form patterns. And if you want to learn more about personality types, see the link below. And as you listen to this, talk, keep in mind your personality type and how you may naturally think in a similar or dissimilar way to me. So it looks like we could be faced with a global pandemic. It could be true, may not be true. We will only know about a year from now when we get the opportunity to look back on what actually happened. Once again, that is about perspective. You can live totally in the present, or you can look back on the past, or you can look to the future. And in addition, you can play with pseudo-orientation in time and take yourself back like 3,000 years, right? And look towards now. And you can also take yourself out into the future, say a year or 10 years from now, and look back towards now. These shifts in perspective can give you a totally different understanding on the topic of conversation. So when I look at news and memes on the coronavirus, I see it just as data. I also have an internal authority sort with an external check meta program. So I don't just believe what some so-called expert tells me is true. And I need to gather a lot of data from different sources, and then in terms of time, I reflect back upon the past, and from that I think about how the future could unfold. Whereas there are some people who seem to discount the past and either focus totally in the present or on the future. Now, these are all meta programs and influence how people think and act. In terms of forming an opinion, I'm slow. An indicator of introversion. I need to think about things for a while. At times I need to wait until sometime after an event to do that. That's an aspect of my convincer meta program. And yet simultaneously, I am a prepper. I am proactive rather than reactive. If you want to learn more about NLP Meta Programs and personality types, check the links below the video and join the Facebook NLP and Hypnotherapy group for some fascinating conversations. I love discussing personalities. Now, as I go through this talk, try and keep in mind patterns. Look for patterns and try and avoid getting hooked into the content. So you don't discount the content, you just look at the content in relationship to the patterns. So, have we faced a situation like the coronavirus before? We have indeed. Let's go back to the AIDS epidemic of 1984. That is when I was living in Fremantle, Western Australia. We were told that AIDS would destroy humanity. Millions would die. Sadly, many have died, but it was nothing like the media told us. So back in the 1980s, an American man dying from AIDS sells up, moves to North India to die. but within 2 weeks, his blood profile had returned to normal and he recovered. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? So he changes his environment and changes his diet and he recovers. So was there something in his environment and lifestyle in the US that caused the health problem? And for those of you who are interested, his recovery was attributed to eating fresh coconut. But it's more than that. He changed his environment and the physical, emotional, mental and chemical stresses on the body. And then he ate a totally different diet. And the focus needs to be more on what he removed than on what he began to eat. You will see this pattern over and over again. A person goes on a vegan diet and then over a period of 3 to 6 months, there is a significant improvement in the health. And I will suggest that the improvement is not so much about what they are eating, but on what they are not eating. Because in so many cases, the vegan diet is not sustainable. I know this from personal experience with me and a number of naturopath friends. Okay, now let's not hook into the content, all right? Remember, we're just looking for patterns. And then after the HIV/AIDS epidemic, there was the avian flu, SIV, swine flu, SARS, MERS, Ebola, Zika, and that list is probably not complete or in the right sequence, but it gives you an idea. And with each new epidemic, the media ramped up the fear. I remember one Saturday morning listening to a health spokesman on ABC radio in Australia saying that when the SARS pandemic hits, blah, blah, blah. But the pandemic never hit, thank God. And I never heard him or any of the other experts ever come back onto the radio to give a retraction or an explanation. The pattern the media use so often in terms of time is when. Rarely do you hear them talking about if. This could be because they know that when is going to ramp up the fear, which will get the views to their channel so that they get the ratings and get to sell advertising space. And you've got to keep in mind why the media deliver the content that they do and the way they do. For them, it is about careers, money, and prestige. Even the government-funded, or I should say, the taxpayer-funded ABC in Australia, even these people have an investment in keeping their jobs. And so they also hook their viewers into the content with the emotionally charged language. Anyway, every 4 or 5 years, the media tells us that we are faced with a global pandemic. The governments, health departments, pharmaceutical industry, businesses, schools, police, military, etc., steadily improve their strategies for dealing with the future pandemic. And what do those strategies look like? Are they about helping us improve our quality of life, as in cleaning up our environments and eating a healthier diet? Or are the strategies more about taking away our freedoms and bringing in a totalitarian one world government? Patterns, patterns, patterns. Remember to look for patterns. The relationships between things and ideas. So at this point, we need to take a look at Louis Pasteur and Antoine Béchamp. These two French scientists lived at the same time in the 19th century. Pasteur came up with the idea that germs cause disease. He was an extrovert. And so he was out there in the marketplace talking to groups of doctors, and eventually his theory became accepted. Béchamp, on the other hand, was the introvert. His theory was that the environment creates an opportunity for germs to manifest. So, if you throw your rubbish and excrement in the street, then it is going to breed all sorts of nasty bugs and provide a home for disease-carrying rats and mice. If germs cause the disease, then I guess we just spray the rubbish and the rodents with toxic chemicals, and that should fix the problem. But Béchamp, by the way, being an introvert, he stayed in his office, stayed in his room. He didn't get out there and talk to the doctors. Béchamp, he says, if you create an environment in your body, and I would add in your mind and soul, if you create an environment within yourself, which is like a garbage tip, then you can expect to have germs and bugs moving in to do what they were designed to do, and that is to clean up shit. And Béchamp went even further to suggest that as you modify the environment within the body, that the germs mutate to suit the environment, one way or the other. So they could become good germs or bad germs. Now, remember that not all bugs are bad for you. A healthy human being can have up to 2 kilograms of good bugs in their gut in any one day. That's a lot. And now as people understand that more, there is more focus on the healthy biome and on including prebiotics with your meals. Okay, so keeping Pasteur and Béchamp in mind, Pasteur says germs cause disease, whereas Béchamp says the environment is the problem. So let's look for some patterns. If you look to where disease has manifested itself over the centuries, start by looking at the environment. Let's start with New York around 1900 or so. There was poor sanitation, unclean drinking water, and add to that, farmers diluted the milk from their cows with water from the Hudson River. And as you can imagine, the health of New Yorkers was not that good. So what action was taken? Laws were introduced to ensure that milk was pasteurized in an effort to kill the bacteria in the milk. But just keep in mind that many of the cows at that time, referencing the article that I read some years back, the cows were unhealthy, river water was added to the milk, and lo and behold, people got sick. So pasteurization of the milk was a good idea, but at the same time, a modern sewage system and supply of fresh water and better hygiene measures was introduced into the city of New York. So on one hand, bugs were killed. That's good. But also the environment was improved on the farms and in the city. It's probably even better. Okay, so now let's take a look at hand washing. There was a time, believe it or not, when doctors would walk from the mortuary into the labour ward covered in blood. The blood on their clothing being worn like a badge of honour. And then came along a Hungarian physician and scientist, Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis, who discovered that the washing of hands with a chlorinated lime solution significantly reduced the mortality rate. And it took a few years for the doctors to change, but eventually they learned to wear clean clothing to work and wash their hands before working with a patient. So you can look at this in two ways. One is that the chlorine solution used to wash the hands killed germs, but also that the washing of their clothes and hands with soapy water cleaned the environment. So Pasteur focused on killing germs, while Béchamp focused on creating a healthy environment. If you can keep the environment clean, then you don't need to use toxic chemicals to kill bugs. Now, for those of you who like to meet with friends over a drink in the local pub, there was a time not so long ago when they had a trough which ran the length of the bar on the ground, where patrons could spit, urinate, and throw their cigar butts. I wouldn't actually call that a healthy environment. After a while, spitting in public became unacceptable and people learned to carry a cotton handkerchief, though they seem to have gone out of fashion. Now, if you have never used a handkerchief, they're great. Look, you can blow your nose on them, and if you need to, you can sneeze, and then, then you can use it to cover your mouth so you don't pollute the air around you. And for those of you who have never used a handkerchief, use a clean one each day. Every couple of weeks, you soak them in hot water with a little bleach and then put them in the washing machine. So they are reusable. That makes them ecologically friendly. So all the environmentalists out there should be waving their handkerchiefs in the air, Anyway, up until about 20 years ago, I used to iron my handkerchiefs. For a lot of people from my era, this was standard practice. And in my first aid training, the instructor would tell us to use a clean handkerchief to bandage a wound because the ironed handkerchief was sterile. Not bad, hey? Now I have a proposition for you. If you're interested in being certified in my handkerchief certification training program, then join us over at the Facebook group to get details. This certification workshop is so sterile that we're going to deliver it online. You will learn how to iron and fold a handkerchief, how to blow your nose, how to cough into a handkerchief and fold it carefully and return it to your pocket. Now, I know that some people use tissues, which is good, but I see too many people snotting and spitting in the street. It's disgusting. And in some cases, people defecate in the street. So why am I telling you this? Because there is a pattern. There is a time when people only bathed once or twice a year and they ate communal food with their hands. And then there was a quantum leap in consciousness and societies learned some basic hygiene practices such as eating with a fork, washing the dishes after a meal, drinking fresh clean water or fermented ale, washing the hands after visiting the toilet with soapy water, and cleaning the environment to remove dust, dirt, insects and rodents. And with time, people's health began to improve. But who took the credit? Well, in many cases, I think the medical industry claimed the improvements in health was because of improved drugs or vaccinations, when perhaps the improvements in health were more about the result of a cleaner environment. Do you see the pattern? Pasteur versus Béchamp. The engineers install sewage systems and fresh water on tap. The council workers clean up the garbage and take it away for disposal on a tip. People wash their hands with soap and water and dry them on a clean towel. They stop spitting and snotting in the street. Well, to a significant degree. The health of the nation improves, but the medical industry takes the credit. And Pasteur continues to dominate the way we look at disease and health. So do you see the pattern? A dirty environment is associated with poor health. Clean up the environment and the health magically improves. So let's take a look at some different types of environments. If you look at the people, birds and animals that get sick and then look at their environment, you will see patterns. And what are some of the patterns? Chickens, pigs and cows crammed into cages in factories, fed a junk food diet with antibiotics designed to increase their growth rate. But the antibiotics also mutate bugs and shit like that. It's just horrible. Any reasonable person would know that this is wrong. The birds and animals are stressed, which is going to make them more susceptible to illness. And then we get humans crowded into factories and crowded into cities. And the humans, what are the humans eating? What is the quality of their diet? In some cases, humans are eating unclean animals, birds and insects. In many cases, people are eating processed junk food loaded with chemical additives. You can't even call it food. So even though this supermarket may be nice and clean, even though the tins and packages all look nice and clean, what is actually in the package is not, in terms of chemical additives and nutrition. So how does this affect the inner environment of the person? And then we have to consider the chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, and atmospheric pollution from motor vehicles and industry. Now, back in 2003, there was an article in the Wise Traditions Journal, Summer 2003, page 13, which said that SARS disease symptoms are identical to pesticide, air pollution, disease symptoms, and these poisons correlate in time and place with SARS epidemics. Not only that, but they found that some of the best characterized SARS disease cases were negative for the SARS virus. There are also articles online which propose that pesticide poisoning may be the most significant factor in the death of birds attributed to West Nile virus. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so let's continue. Now let's think of the outgassing from the plastic and vinyl in your car. And you thought that new car smell was good for you. Next time you walk into a shopping centre, pay attention to what you can smell. Whether you walk into a clothing store or electrical appliance store or the hardware, what do you smell? Yeah, chemicals. Are those chemicals good for your health? Are those environments good for you? Are they good for the employees? I'll let you think about that. And then there is the perfume and deodorant that some people reek of. Over here on the Gold Coast, there's the perfume section on the ground floor of Myers department store. That place is so toxic. If I have to walk through it, then I do it as fast as I can. It's dangerous. And while we're on the topic of retail stores, let's not forget that those thermal receipts you get at the checkout are covered with toxic BPA. So then you go home to where it is safe. Really? I don't know where you live, but look around you. Fresh paint? Carpets? Furniture? Computers? Televisions? Electric toasters and kettles? Geez. When I buy a new electric kettle or toaster, I have to sort of put it out in the veranda, use it out there for hours and hours until it outgasses all the toxic chemicals. Anyway, cleaning chemicals in the house that you use to clean, they all outgas toxic chemicals to a degree. And if there is fiberglass insulation in the ceiling, that could be an additional challenge for your body. And then newly renovated offices are probably one of the worst places you want to spend your day. I watched some tradies renovate the offices next door, and I felt really sorry for them because they're pulling down all the walls and the bits and pieces, ripping up the old carpet, and they're breaking down all the ceilings. And there's all this fiberglass and insulation and shit just coming down. And then they had to clean it up, and then the new tradies come in, and then they actually paint the floor with some toxic glue, and then they're laying down this rubber carpet. It's like, geez, something's not right. Anyway. And then a little while back, I visited the air pistol range at my local gun club. We actually do have gun clubs in Australia. They had recently renovated it. You know, that's the air pistol range, which is like an indoor range. But I could only stay in there for a few minutes. it just reeked of chemicals. And while we're on the topic of gun clubs, breathing lead fumes and handling the ammunition with bare fingers may give you something to think about. A bit of chelation therapy may come in handy. Okay, then we get out onto the street. So if you live in a low populated area, the pollution may be quite low, right? But wherever you get busy traffic, there is the atmospheric pollution. If you go online and do some research, you will find that traffic-related pollution is linked to heart disease, lung cancer, asthma, bronchitis, tinnitus, headaches, and fatigue. And don't forget the EMF pollution from electrical wiring, mobile phones, microwave ovens, Wi-Fi, and now 5G cell towers. May also be a part of your environment. And then, of course, just about everything we buy is wrapped in plastic, and the plastic ends up in the ocean and pollutes the food chain, which finds its way back to us humans. So do you see the patterns? So you put animals or people into a crowded environment, stress them, pollute the environment, feed them junk with just barely the nutrients required to sustain life, and lo and behold, they get sick. Who could ever imagine that? Okay, so we learn to recognize patterns. We keep in mind Pasteur and Béchamp. Pasteur's proposition was that germs cause disease, whereas Béchamp's proposition was the environment created a situation for disease to occur. In some cases, germs most definitely do cause disease. But if you create an environment in which you flourish, both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, then the body will find it much easier to deal with germs and toxic chemicals. I remember more than one experiment that I read about where a doctor infected himself with a pathogen, but he didn't get sick, and he never displayed the disease symptoms. So that gives you something to think about, doesn't it? And still on the topic of health and environment, back in the days when TB was a problem in Switzerland, the recommendation given was for the patient to go to the mountains where the sunshine was stronger, because they believed that the higher altitude environment and sunshine was conducive to health. But what should also be noted is that in the cities of the lowland, the milk was pasteurized, and yet in the mountains it was taken raw. So there always seems to be a number of variables in play, but so often the evidence demonstrates that if you move to a healthier environment and spend more time outside, then the body will heal and you will live longer. I made a video on this some time back, which is titled the Icaria effect. I finally got the pronunciation right. I was called the Icaria, but it's the Icaria effect. So to summarize this video, keep in your mind your personality type, your dominant cognitive functions, and your meta program preferences, as this will influence how you look at data and come to a decision. And I would suggest that you learn to make a distinction between process and content, and to learn to look at data as data and avoid hooking into it. Information is just information. Look for patterns. That is what I would suggest you do. Look for patterns and see how the information relates to other informations, things, and ideas. For some people, this could be transformative. Thanks for watching. I'm humbled that you stayed with me. Please leave your comments below and feel free to join us over at the Facebook NLP and Hypnotherapy group for a discussion. And if you can, I'd really appreciate it if you could like the video, give it a comment, and share it on social media so that we can boost the views to the video. All the best to you. Look forward to seeing you again.